Welcome to Brew Crime, the podcast where we drink brews, talk crime, conspiracies, mine disasters, or whatever catches our attention. This is Mike and my co-host.
Grumpy and sleepy and Doc and sneezy but primarily sleepy. Hi ho.
You're a
I'm
high ho, are you?
a hi ho. Hi ho. I never liked it because I always felt like they were about to call me and then they never finished my last name and then I just got depressed.
Aw.
Oh. I always wanted to be grumpy. It just seemed like a good person to be. But always wanting to be grumpy and then ending up being grumpy without knowing it, that was worth it.
I always wanted to be dopey.
Oh man, dude, his
Jump
ears
back through
were
that window for
awesome.
another kiss.
The best.
He was
The best.
slick.
Oh,
Oh my. I
man.
didn't like that movie that much, but I like that guy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I ended up being super dopey and you ended up being Doc. So here we
There
are.
we go. Yeah. Well, we're back to talk about mine disasters again.
Yes. Yeah, number 6 and number 8 led me to old number 7. Because I needed it by the end of that. And
Yep.
now I'm excited to hear about yours.
Yeah. Well, I titled this Sometimes Disasters Come in Threes. The Springhill Coal Mine Disasters.
Oh no.
Yes. And my beer pairing for this is from a brewery that I've actually never had any beer from, Abandoned Rail Brewing in Penticton, and it's called Tunnel Vision Euro IPA. So
Tunnel vision.
kind of fitting, right?
Yeah.
Mine shaft
Yeah.
tunnel. I don't know.
I don't like any of that.
It was a stretch, but it worked.
That's that's the only tunnel that I like is the one that ends with a glass full of beer.
Don't go to the light.
Oh, that looks good.
It's fire. It's not anything else. It's
Did you
got
just go?
quite
Did you
the.
just tell the head of your beer don't go towards the light?
You said tunnel vision. I said don't go to the light. It's fire.
Ah, it's fire. Don't go there either.
Beer looks like it's kind of a deep orange. Looks way darker on the video. Nice fluffy head with like small bubbles and big rocky bubbles. It's a nice head.
That's what she said.
It's got kind of a sweet, fruity nose. I'm not getting too much of those, but I think it's just because of allergies. But yeah, it's got a
Not
really
COVID.
nice, like juicy, fruity flavor. Not really any bitterness. It almost tastes more like a bit of a New England IPA, which I don't know why they call it a Euro IPA. I'm not sure what the difference is. I'm sure it says in the can somewhere, and I'm not going to read it. But a little bit of like grassiness in the background from the hops. Yeah, almost no bitterness though. It's sweet, it's juicy, it's nice.
So if I were to write a headline for Tunnel Vision, it would say Tunnel Vision. Great head. Juicy.
Yes. Looks like it's
Okay.
6.5% alcohol. Yeah, no, it says here like it's got complex notes of caramel, citrus, raisins, and coffee, which I can see the citrus. I don't really get much of the rest of that. Maybe it's not a fresh can, I don't know. But
I was gonna say, like, I
good.
feel like you would have called that out right away. Um,
Yeah, but it's good.
it sounds like we both chose really, really fruity IPAs this time by accident.
Yes. No, mine was just by name, so that's all I pick it by.
I like it. I like that.
How does the name pair?
Oh, fair, fair.
All righty. Well, let's get into it. Spring Hill was once a busy set of mines, but it now sits as the Spring Hill Coal Mining National Historic Site. Today, there is a museum and some buildings from the original mine. Canada would not confederate until July 1st, 1867, but the then colony of Nova Scotia would begin mining coal in 1720. The Spring Hill area is now a business park, but then the ground was so plentiful in coal that people would literally dig it up in their yards, which is nuts. Just like, let's just dig our
Holy
yard up and get
shite.
coal. So in 1870, the first actual
I'm
company was,
cold.
yeah, exactly. Go get some rocks out of the ground. Hey, Billy, you're going to work for your meal. I know you're only
Billy,
12,
if
but
you
get that
stand on
shovel.
that, if you stand on that, we'll have diamonds. Right.
Yeah. So in 1870, the first actual company would be set up to mine the coal in Spring Hill, and Parsborough Coal and Railway Company, that was the name. Both the United States and the new country of Canada needed coal, and Spring Hill was there to serve up the black gold. Canada had promised an intercontinental railway to entice colonies to join, and they needed coal to fill this, right? So that line would link Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Upper and Lower Canada, modern day Quebec and Ontario at the time. With the westernmost province of British Columbia joining the Confederation in 1871, they needed to extend the railway all the way out west. That would finish in 1885, which is actually pretty fast considering.
It's a lot faster than the highway construction.
Yeah, no shit, right? Unfortunately, that was on a lot of practically slave labor of Chinese people back then, but that's a different story for a different day.
Right.
This is all to say that coal was a huge thing in the building of Canada as a nation and was a huge export to the United States at the time. From the humble beginnings in 1720, only 100 years later, they would be mining 1 million tons of coal each and every year.
Jesus.
And this is a tiny
So
province.
my 20 so my 2,500 pounds a day was kids play.
Yeah. The area around Spring Hill would go from 20 residents in 1861 to 900 people in only 20 years later. Production would increase so much that Nova Scotia would be the top producer of coal in Canada from 1867 until 1914.
Jesus.
There is a slight issue with coal mining. It is extremely dangerous, as you laid out only last week.
Yep. Yep.
This is no different for Spring Hill, and unfortunately, in 1891, 1956, and 1958, this would be proven as a point.
What? It's not
Yes.
funny, but it's like the first time wasn't enough for you?
Yeah, right?
Uh,
So, playing with poor air circulation, flammable material, including flammable dust, as well as explosives spells danger. And then there is just the fact that sometimes the earth gets mad when you extract a ton of rock from the earth.
it tends to want to crush you. Crush you
Yeah.
like a bug.
This one is just subtitled February 21st, 1891. Spring Hill was multiple surface and underground mines, and in 1891, the mine employed over 1,000 men and boys. And it very specifically added the boys.
Yep.
A woman known as Mother Coo or Old Miss Coos, and even Pictou Prophet would foretell of an explosion at the mine in May of 1891. And this would drive the union members to push to have the mine inspected to ensure that everything was running smoothly. So yeah, like 1891, already
I'm, gue-
unions.
I'm I'm guessing they didn't like the idea of inspecting.
So I'm not sure exactly when the prediction was made, but the union would be successful in getting a committee together to inspect the mine. The union was all for it. Of course, the company would probably fight back on it, right? It seems that the
Yep.
miners and the neighborhood believe that what Miss Coos had to say, right? Like she seemed to, when she said something, people listened. That committee would state after a full top to bottom inspection that it was one of, if not the most safe mine in the province. And then the province would follow up on February 20th, 1891, with a full inspection. And that inspector would fully agree with the committee and say that the mine was absolutely following safety standards and was safe to continue to operate.
I'm gonna go with the next thing you say is gonna show that it wasn't.
Yes. Do you remember the date that I mentioned at the start of the story? February 21st, 1891?
Yes.
And I just said February 20th, 1891 was the inspection?
Oh, Jesus. Everything's fine here. Everything's 12 hours later.
Yeah. The next day would prove that even with all of the safety procedures of the 1890s in place, this was no safe place to be. There has never been a definitive cause of the explosion that would follow on February 21st, 1891 at 12:43 p.m. But a theory that is strongly suspected is that when Thomas Wilson, a man that would handle the explosives, might have accidentally caused the explosion. Once a vein of coal was found, they would drill holes to find or to fill them with dynamite and then blow it up to loosen the rock, right? They would then follow with pickaxes to break the rock and get the coal. The problem is the coal is flammable and coal dust is explosive. When the dynamite was placed, it would be packed to contain the explosion, sort of like you mentioned last week. It is thought that there was a crack in the packing and that the flames might have burst out of the crack and ignited the coal dust and gases in the mine. He was at the 1,900 feet below ground level, but this explosion would rush up to the 1,300-foot level.
What? Jesus.
Yes. At this level, Mineshaft 1 had a tunnel that led to Mineshaft 2. The explosion and the gases released would kill 121 men and boys almost instantly. The ones close to the explosion would be blown apart, but the gas would asphyxiate others. 4 men would die of their injuries later, bringing the death toll to 125 boys and men. 17 of the dead were below the age of 16 years old.
God.
After the explosion, something known as white damp was responsible for killing many of the men, as the gases would render them unconscious. White damp is a byproduct of the combustion of coal and consists mostly of carbon monoxide, but also of hydrogen sulfide. Great for your lungs.
It's it's a real pick me up.
Exactly. So the damp part of the name is due to the high humidity that comes along with the explosion and gases in the coal explosions, right? So it's thick, it's misty, it chokes you to death. Not nice.
No.
So in the end, the gases would kill more than the actual explosion. At 2 p.m. on the same day, the last survivor would leave the mine. Over the next 5 days, volunteers would go back down into the mine and recover all of the bodies. All of the bodies would be brought to the carpentry shop, the temporary morgue, where the bodies would be ID'd. Some of the bodies they could ID easily as they just looked like they were asleep, while others had to be ID'd by their clothing or the repairs of their clothing. So, like, probably their wives had like stitched up their clothes a certain way, and that's the only way they could ID them. The people near the explosion were unfortunately mutilated. The last body to be recovered was of Henry Swift. So, yeah, not good. In the wake of the disaster, the town of Springhill would put together the Springhill Relief Fund, and the Halifax Morning Herald would also create a fund to try and help support the families of the victims of the disaster. The funds would request $70,000 in donations, but would end up collecting more than $140,000 in only 3 months. And again, this is in
Wow.
late 1800s, so this is a lot of money.
That's
The inflation calculator I used only went back as far as 1914, but as of 1914, $140,000 would be worth $3.7 million today. So that's impressive.
Yeah, that's a hefty sum.
So to say that the community supported the victims' families would be a serious understatement. Quote from the Huddersfield Daily Examiner on February 28, 1891. The loss of life at Springhill Mine, in which an explosion of gas occurred, is now put down at over 100. Some of the bodies were so mutilated that they had to be removed in bags. The spectacle was very sickening, and the sound of grief on the part of the afflicted relatives was heard all night long. And then this is a quote from Lord Knutsford of Lord Stanley of Preston.
I'm 4 years old.
Yes, I know, right? Knutsford. Knut, but Knutsford.
You better be a lord with a name like that.
Yeah.
And I can say it, damn it.
So, quote, Her Majesty commands me to inform you that Her Majesty has heard with regret of the Springhill Colliery disaster and desires me to convey an expression of Her Majesty's sympathy with the injured and with the relatives of those who have lost their lives. Be good enough to send further intelligence of those rescued alive for the Queen's information.
Do you think the Queen ever heard about it?
I don't know, but I'm sure that made the people feel a little better. Is still part of,
for sure.
maybe she actually cares. She didn't probably, but I didn't bother to
Uh,
look up which queen that was either. I have no idea. That's it for the first disaster. November 11th, 1956 was like any other day at the Springhill Mine, number 4. Coal was extracted from the rocks and then transferred onto train cars that were set up a series known as a trip. So it'd just be a bunch of mine cars all tethered together. The trip would be dragged up the slope of the mine to the exit where it would be transferred onto the next step of the refinement. This line would drag the trip from the 4,400 foot below ground level all the way to the top. A long fucking way down.
that's ridiculous.
At the top of the slope, there were very large fans that would blow fresh air down into the mine, which makes sense. You need to keep air circulation.
Sure.
This airflow would also stir up a bunch of coal dust that is highly flammable.
That's why you're supposed to water it down.
Yes. Around 5 p.m., 6 of the train cars broke loose from the trip and plummeted back down the shaft to the beginning of the line.
I'm sorry. I was going to wait until you were done with the whole thing to say this, but
Yeah.
truly the parallels between the two of our situations and
Yeah.
even both of them that you've said, they were connected, etc. I mean, it's just uncanny. That's insane.
Yep. So at the bottom of the hill was a high voltage line, and the train cars would strike it directly.
That sounds like a great idea.
This collision would cause a large arc of electricity. This arc was all that was needed to cause a devastating explosion, as you'd think, right? The explosion would be so large it shot flames out of the mine 197 feet into the air.
Jesus.
The explosion would destroy a building at the top of the slope and kill 5 people instantly, fatally injure 2 more who passed later, and blew 2 other people free of the building, saving their lives. Windows in the nearby town would be blown out also. This all happened by 5:07.
Jeez.
So, yeah. Or was it 7 minutes from the train cars separating to the end of that explosion?
And I bet you the longest amount of time was waiting for the train cars to get to the bottom.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it was probably like 6 minutes to get to the bottom and 1
Yeah.
minute to just destroy everything.
Can you imagine, like, I don't know what the communication was like then, but can you imagine being at the bottom of that and somebody saying, oops? Like, what do
Yeah.
you mean,
Oops, I
oops?
did it again.
Listen, Britney Spears, you don't oops
Exactly.
in a mine shaft. You just don't.
Unfortunately, they oopsed a lot back then.
That's what I'm getting here. Yeah.
Yeah. The mine operation would try and send a quick rescue down with dragger men who were trained to undertake rescues in mines, like underwater, when there's explosions, anything. There was so much carbon monoxide, methane, as well as the damp that I mentioned in the last disaster that only 100 feet into the mine they would begin to struggle. 2 of these men died before they could get back out of the mine.
Holy crap. No, no canaries there.
No. Well, and these guys would actually have masks and everything. Like they
Oh,
were trained for this, and they still.
yeah. Oh,
I don't
God.
know about the oxygen situation or anything, but masks were mentioned. They would temporarily seal the mine with the intention of starving the fires of oxygen, as there was still a very possible chance of secondary explosions.
So, um, rescue didn't work. So we're just going to assume we need to recover bodies now. Let's just
Yeah,
close it up.
yeah. So around 2 hours later, it was noted that there were still 118 men underground with a
God,
poor likelihood of surviving, but they had to try and mount a rescue operation as they had noticed fluctuations in the oxygen lines running into the mine.
no kidding.
Miners had figured out how to breathe by opening and closing oxygen lines. The damp had filled the shaft with only a small pocket of oxygen at the bottom of the tunnel. This was lucky as many of the miners would pass out and fall into the oxygen layer, leaving them to breathe while unconscious.
Holy crap.
So new draggers would head back into the number 4 mine using a tunnel from number 2. They would have to crawl into the mine as to not die of asphyxiation.
Yeah, no.
So while the tunnel is way taller than them, they have to still be down just like in yours.
I'd be that guy at the front going, have fun, guys.
Yeah. Saturday would see 7 miners from the lower levels begin to crawl up the mine through a fanway. They would plug their noses and cut into airlines or go to valves to breathe oxygen. It was the only way to breathe. These men would come across another group of survivors at the 3,500-foot level. These men would all power on and find the rescue team. A group at the 5,400-foot level would barricade a door and use Brattis, a heavy cloth used in mines, and compressed air to make a breathable air pocket until rescue, which is just amazing. By Monday, November 5th, 1956, a total of 88 miners would be rescued, with 39 dying.
Wow.
The shaft was then sealed until January 19th, 1957, when it would be reopened temporarily to retrieve and identify any other men who had been in the mine shaft that fateful day. The rescue operation on the ground was run by the Salvation Army, Red Cross, and the Royal Canadian Navy, with national news covering the disaster. Donations would stream in for the Springhill Disaster Relief Fund. This would have been an international news story, but it happened to just to happen but it happened just after the Soviet Union invaded Hungary. So that unfortunately overshadowed it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's get on to the final disaster. October 23rd, 1958.
So it happened in 56. It closed
Yep.
until 57.
Well, just that
Oh,
one shaft.
that's right. That's right. That's right.
There was
That's right.
multiple. There was 5 shafts total.
Yeah, well, they're down to
Yeah.
three.
Well,
Math.
I talk about it right here, actually.
All right.
The last disaster was probably still in the town's mind when this one happened only a few years later. By 1958, 4 of the 5 mines in the Spring Hill area had shut down due to safety issues, as well as economic reasons. You can probably read that it was no longer economical to have their men die in the mines when with the exception of the last mine, number 2. The other reason that the mine were shutting down is that the real fact that the Canadian trains were being swapped over to diesel power at the time, hurting the value of coal.
Mm-hmm.
So number 2 mine had a depth of 4,600 feet or 1,400 meters, but being dug at an angle of 30 degrees, the tunnel was over 4 kilometers long or 2.5 miles.
Jesus Christ. They were hanging out in Montana.
Practically, right? The mine was getting less and less coal as the years went on. The ground was becoming less and less stable. In the
Oh.
40 years before 1958, the shaft would have over 500 little earthquakes from the ground shifting due to all the rock and coal that was being removed from the earth.
God.
These tremors were known as bumps, and they alone would kill 350 men over time in the 5 mines. And those, other than this bump, those weren't considered the disasters at this mine. So from disastersongs.ca, quote, the effects of the bump tend to be described as the ceiling and or floor suddenly lurching towards its opposite, often meeting and crushing what lay in between and causing showers of debris and releasing gases. Fucking terrifying. The floor and the floor and the ceiling meet.
Sounds like a Friday night.
Yeah. Out on the dance floor?
Correct. Floor and
Yeah, yeah.
ceiling meet.
I'm pretty sure we're both too old for that now.
Also true.
So, trying to stop the frequency of these bumps, an engineer, Lewis Frost, put in new innovations and it did reduce the frequency of the bumps. The miners didn't agree with these changes, though. Quote, the college boys didn't believe us when we told them that if they continued doing things that way, they were going to kill all of us. And that was veteran miner Harold Brine. So let's move to October 23rd, 1958. There were 174 miners in the mine working deep in the mine, very deep. They were around 4.2 kilometers or 2.6 miles underground. At about 7 p.m., a small bump would hit the mine, and nothing much was thought of it, as it wasn't an unexpected situation at the mine, and the miners thought of it as a good thing as it relieved pressure.
I every time see I'd be that guy where every time a bump happened, I'd be like George Sanford and be like, "This is the big one. This is it. We're
This is
going." I'd
it!
like
Run, we're
permanently have a
gonna
sandwich.
die!
I'd have a sandwich sign. They'd call me Apocalypse Man. Just
Yeah, yeah. Brown pants and a sandwich sign.
brown pants and a sandwich. That sounds like a punk rock album. Brown
Does,
pants and
doesn't
a
it?
sandwich sign.
Probably by no effects.
You're not wrong.
So, unfortunately, at 8:06, a huge bump would hit the mine. The biggest bump to ever hit a mine in North America at the time.
Wow.
The bump was actually three separate seismic events that the town felt right away. It was noted the force of the tremor was equivalent to 1,000 tons of dynamite exploding underground. So, for a comparison, that amount of dynamite would fall around 4.0 on the Richter scale. This was also noted as the same force as a small atomic bomb. No, nowhere as big as like the ones that dropped on Japan, but a
Well,
small one.
listen, you know what we do. We do
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
do.
Go big or go home, right? Unfortunately. So
Yeah.
the seismic wave would take 17 seconds to travel to Halifax, Nova Scotia, 177 kilometers or 110 miles away,
God.
and take just over a minute to be felt in Ottawa, Ontario, 1,300 kilometers or 808 miles away.
Those miners had not a chance. I haven't even heard about what happened to them. They did not have a chance.
Right? So it would also be felt in Quebec. All locations that had seismographs would point to Spring Hill being the center of this earthquake. Some men would be killed instantly when the bump happened, as the floor would shoot up 3 meters or 10 feet directly up to drive the men, machines, and gear right into the roof of the mine. When the bump hit, the town knew something big had happened underground and scrambled to get the rescue operation underway. Many men were not killed right away and would begin to stumble, hurt, up out of the mine. The rescuers would help get them up out of the mine right away and then head back into the mine to find more of the survivors. Unfortunately for two groups of guys, they would be stuck on the other end of the carnage deep below in the mine entrance or deep below the mine entrance without access to food or water.
Oh,
Yep. By October 25th, 1958, at 12 p.m., the mine GM Harold Gordon would be quoted on the news as saying that there was no hope for any miners save those at the 13,000 wall, and that was faint. This was also the first ever mine disaster that could be followed live on TV from around North America. And if you didn't have the access to that, there was also on every radio station.
good God.
Miners were losing hope of finding any more survivors, even if they didn't agree with Harold, as it had already been 2 days since the bump. On October 29th, 1958, Wednesday, rescuers digging new tunnels to get deeper into the mine would hear men speaking through pipes. On the next day at 2:30 a.m., the first 12 survivors would be rescued. The last 7 to be rescued would not be found until Saturday, November 1st, 1958. At 4 a.m., they would be located, and by 6:30 a.m., they would be with rescuers. By this time, basically all remains of the dead had been collected from the mine also. So like they were literally the last people left in the mine. The final tally of this bump would see 74 miners die right away, with one more dying like soon after of their injuries. There were also another 19 that would be seriously injured. It was also noted while gases in the mine were an issue, it was nowhere near as bad as other disasters, as this bump caused no fires. The fires are what causes the damp. This disaster would shutter the last mine in Spring Hill, and on that day, basically the entire town was out of work. So once again, the Spring Hill Disaster Relief Fund would be started up, and they would raise 2 million or 10.5 million today. It is worth noting that these following groups helped with the aid and rescue efforts in the disaster: the Royal Canadian Navy, the Red Cross, the Royal Canadian Legion, the Auxiliary, St. John Ambulance Association, the Salvation Army, the Halifax Police, the Boy Scouts, and the volunteer daggermen from the surrounding communities. Miners thought that the Springhill mines were cursed, and while I do not believe in curses, I don't blame any of the men for thinking this was the case,
Yeah, not at
because
all.
holy shit.
Yeah,
And that's the Springhill coal mine disasters.
that's that's ridiculous.
So, JT, you want to go on a coal mine tour with me?
Um,
You're
I'm
sick
gonna
that day?
go. There is not enough alcohol in this world. Well, there might be. I mean, you knock me out and then drag me, sure, but
How about some cannabis?
might make
You'll
it a
just
little more bearable.
you might be just at fuck it all.
I mean, that's usually what I take every day. I take a good healthy dose of fuck it all. So,
Nice. All right. Well, I hope that everyone has liked learning about these, well, I guess technically four coal mine disasters. And we'll be back to true crime next time.
yeah, yeah. Renewable energy,
Only because
but
they're all
not
above ground,
Elon.
right?
Right, 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 right. I mean, listen, it's worth a few whales going crazy if you have some big old wind turbines in the sea. So, you know,
Wind turbines in the sea, huh?
in on top, around, under the sea.
Sea. Don't wind turbines cause cancer?
I'm sure they do. They activate
Uh,
those 5G chips that are now in us. So,
oh yes, of course, yes,
I mean,
yes.
how else are they going to find their adrenochrome?
Oi. All right. Thanks for tuning into Brew Crime. You can find us on all social media platforms at Brew Crime. We have a Facebook group at Brew Crime the Group. If you'd like to support the show, head to patreon.com/brewcrime now. The money goes towards upgrading equipment and making the show that much better. You get one bonus episode a month, as well as early ad-free access to our episodes. So shout out to our Patreon supporters, True Crime Nana, Three Beers In Podcast, and the faves of our lives. Bye.
Um, don't dig. Don't dig.
Oh, wow. All cases in Brew Crime are written by Mike and JT or a writer we credit on the episode, and sources are put into our show notes for each episode. We always want to give credit to the people that research the cases we talk about. Check out our store at tpublic.com/stores/brew-crime-podcast, where you can purchase gear like t-shirts, phone cases, stickers, pillows, and all kinds of other cool stuff. Brew Crime's intro was created by Mike using Creative Commons Attribution licensed audio from purple-planet.com, soundbible.com, and freesoundeffects.com. Logo designed by Ben Greenberg. Thanks for listening to this episode of Brew Crime Podcast.